Okay, I'm going to fade this one down as we go live on Facebook as well. Welcome along to today's Vocal Booth Radio Show. Focus Recordings, Latanza Waters, Sing, Sing, Sing. An Smoove production. Now, if all is well, by the wonders of modern technology, if I can get all of my buttons working, I should be able to go to Mr. Smoove. Can I hear you?
Check, check.
Oh, fantastic. I love it. I absolutely love it. Thank you so much for giving me your time today. Sunday morning, stateside. How are you, my friend?
I'm well, thank you. How about yourself?
Good. I'm very good. I'm very good. You may have seen me having a couple of issues with some fluff on the needles there, but it's nothing that we're not used to, right?
Hey, man, beat matching. The lost art of beat matching.
Every Sunday afternoon, man, you can see I got 1 or 2 pieces of vinyl here, so I'm quite loving it. I'm quite loving it.
Yeah.
Messing around. So let me just say, big up to Maurice, representing everything house music and more. That is a lovely hoodie and a great job that he's doing in spreading the word and putting the record straight about the Chicago house movement. But that's not Maurice. He's had his spotlight. Let's talk about yourself. Confirm for me, 96, 97 on that one?
Yeah, I think so. You know, funny enough, I forget all about that record.
Really? That's one of my favorites of yours, man.
Yeah, that was it was about 96, 97. We originally wrote that for someone else, and her vocal had an underground feel, but it just wasn't quite right. So we ended up just sprucing up Latanza's demo and releasing it, and just the vibe on that is crazy.
So I'm looking on this, and it's saying bass by Ron Hall.
Yes, that Ron Hall is the staple.
Is that the same Ron Hall? Ron Hall and the Motherfunkers, Ron Hall?
No, different Ron Hall.
I was gonna say,
but it is the same Ron Hall that is on a bunch of Maurice's remixes, my stuff, Mike Dunn.
Okay.
Go down the list.
Well, forgive my ignorance. I've never actually seen that before because I would have picked up on it in the past. So just to confirm for anybody that is watching us live, myself, Smoove, we're going to have about 25, 30 minutes of conversation. I purposely have left the music off because I don't want us to get kicked off of Facebook, and I want as many people to see this as possible. So I hope you'll give us 30 minutes of your time, regular Pressure family and Vocal Booth crew. You covered a very extensive story with Lenny Fontana. You told the history of yourself and how you came up. So I don't really want to go too deep into that because it is there for people to go back on and check out. And you're very vocal at the moment with regards to setting the record straight with the sound of Chicago, some of the original artists. You're also very vocal in whether it's a good or bad thing that the house sound crosses over. You also question why you believe house never got as big as hip hop. I mean, that's $1 million question itself right there. So I just want to have a general conversation with you today where your head is at with regards to the whole scene, because I feel you're slowly creeping your way back in, right?
Yeah, it's pulling me. You know, I think the struggle is, and you relate to this as a producer, right?
Mm-hmm.
You definitely, besides your creative expression, you want whatever your musical statement is to have a space, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's putting financial stuff aside, et cetera, just creatively having a space. And because there's so much music out there, I feel like the space is so small, it doesn't match the effort. And that part, I think, has been one of my struggles, is you release a record, and then the record has a lifespan of 4 days, if you're lucky, before the next slew of records come out, good or bad,
Mm-hmm.
But unfortunately, and it took me probably 2 weeks to make that record.
Indeed. So does that hold you back from actually wanting to start producing again?
It does. I think that, I'm not a super religious person or a Bible thumper, but it's something about that statement, casting your pearls amongst the swine, right?
Right.
And that rocks in the back of my head like, yeah, I got like probably, I mean, I got a Kenny Bobian joint, I got a Barbara Tucker joint, I got, several joints on the Times of Water, several joints on Andrea Love, and they're just sitting because I don't want to release them only to have them be around for 3 days and then
But what's the alternative? Them just sit on a hard drive?
I don't know yet. I think the alternative is waiting to figure it out. That's probably what I've been in, is just figuring out what is the angle, what is the difference now. And I think that seeing other people's efforts is convincing me, maybe you never figure it out. Maybe you just let that go out. And I don't know. These are my babies, man. I take my art very seriously.
Of course, of course. So, from one of the things that I would love from yourself, or that I do love about yourself, is that you're very outspoken. You speak your truth. You don't have, in the past, when people have done interviews and they're on that promo trail, there's always the tendency to hold back on saying some negative things. Whereas I've read some of the posts that you've made. You're very true, and what you say, you're not afraid to pull up people, question people on some of their opinions. So with regards to, I mean, the first thing that springs to mind, of course, is the most recent slew of remixes and productions from the likes of Honey Dijon and Beyonce's album and Kanye's album. Was it Kanye's album? Drake's album.
But Kanye has...
Of course, Kanye was like probably 4 or 5 years back when he was using something from MK or whatever. Did it actually ever translate to an increase of awareness, more bookings, more remixes, or did the hype never really materialize?
Let me understand your question. Are you saying in general, do I think it raises the bar for everyone, or are you talking about me specifically?
No, for everyone. The scene itself. Because sometimes when I think about the scene, I understand I am very blinkered. I'm looking from a rose-colored spectacles perspective, thinking about the past. The scene is bigger than a bunch of 55, 60-year-old farts complaining about it's not the same as it was. So is the scene, the house scene, our house scene, translating well to the youngsters, or did that never really happen the way that we expected it to?
I think it's translating well. I think it's translating in a different way, if you will. So you see so many different lives and different things that people are doing from clubs. If you look at the dance floor, the people there's young people there. You know what I mean? So they're into it, whether it's a 20-year-old DJ or a 60-year-old DJ. They're showing up. And I think that the phenomena of alcohol and good music will always have a place, right? So I think that narrative that it's our sound is only for like you said 50, 60-year-old old farts. I think that narrative is not accurate. Now does it result in 50,000 people at a festival? Maybe not. I think maybe if the festival promoters book some of those 50, 60-year-old old farts, it would represent some diversity in programming, some diversity in sound, and collectively just give the crowd some other choices. You know what I mean?
I hear
it's
that.
not so much that, don't get me on an old man rant, but it's not so much that the kids' music sucks. It's just you want them to hear something that is contemporary, but at the same time understand the essence of Earth, Wind, and Fire or Brothers Johnson or whatever. And I'm using that as an analogy to just combining melody, musicianship with the energy of the raw beats, et cetera, et cetera. If you just have the raw energy of the raw beats, then that's all they know, You don't give them a choice to love something as well, not instead, but as well.
I get you. Well, the thing is, after listening back to a lot of the documentaries and the interviews from some of the people who created the scene, and I've said it on 1 or 2 occasions, it is sometimes very easy to forget just how close the house scene was to the end of the disco era. And so, we were following in the footsteps of that huge scene, and so for many years the influences continued down the line, and then you get this, the cyclical nature of music and so on and so forth. It comes into fashion, it goes out of fashion. So it's very interesting to watch from the sidelines, you know, as myself not really out on that circuit anymore. I'm just going to take a moment now. Unfortunately, I'm going to lose. You'll still be able to see me, but when I click off this screen, we're going to lose Smoove temporarily. But I just want to see if there's a few questions here that people are asking while we've got you here. Stu Miller actually asked a question. He says, Shined on Me was in many ways a very niche record that had huge success. I know the answer to this. Do you have a gospel background, or did you just want to recreate that gospel vibe in general? Okay, so
that would be want to recreate that gospel vibe in general. I've always had an inspirational and optimist outlook, right? So I love when house music is very inspirational and the lyrics are positive and such. Again, I'm not a super religious person, but I know the church bump, right? Danny Weatherspoon was my keyboard player for a long time. He's one of the top gospel and jazz producers and musicians. And I have to say, there's a romantic record called Testify. And when I used to play that record, it had an energy that was just insane. It was literally a church bump. He took, sampled a church record. And when you hear my gospel expressions, a lot of that comes from that romantic record, Testify, wanting to get that energy, that vibe, that just, oh my God, So blame it on romance. Rest in peace.
Well, okay, well, we're gonna. Your voice is a little bit out of sync on the video, but that's by the by. And you were also, of course, rubbing shoulders and taking inspiration from some giants. I mean, even though I said I didn't really need to go into your history, I think we do need to kind of touch on that a little bit. What the camp that you were in, and where you were the office you were working in, and the people that you couldn't help but be inspired by.
Absolutely. Well, obviously Steve Hurley is a huge influence. I learned like tons from him. I mean, we could fill 3 hours of shows of me just telling the different stuff that I learned from him, and how much of a fan I am of Hurley. And then being side by side with Maurice, learned so much from him. And when you go down the list, Chicago somehow has a narrative that Chicago does not help Chicago, and I get a whole different story from the beginning of my career. Guys like Farley, guys like Jesse Saunders, the list goes on. It's so many people that I learned directly from, or learned from their records, or learned observing them. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It's just, and anytime there was an opportunity to help, to offer something, I've felt no resistance that way.
Beautiful. So at the moment, this is probably a question I should be asking Maurice, but he is recapturing the stories and laying them down. And it was a while ago, that probably easily 2 years, that you'd spoke to Lenny, and you were painting a very clear picture of the house scene in Chicago, of how it was very much a younger crowd based around school parties, right? The Wendell parties that you went, they were like infamous, and they were responsible for a lot of things. And it's difficult for people to kind of appreciate the fashion, because me personally, I had my own idea of what house heads look like, but then some of the photos and videos I've since seen, the fashion, it's a completely different kind of 80s vibe,
Yeah, absolutely. That movement was definitely a team movement. It was the Black gay culture being regurgitated in a way by straight kids. You know what I mean? So the sensibilities that you have with society of being heterosexual applied to this gay culture. So to the mainstream, house kids definitely look odd and such, but at the same time, there was still some things and some tenets that they had to quote unquote abide by, you know,
Hmm.
because these are kids dressing for school, right? But, you know, so they're on the bus, the everyday bus and that sort of thing, but looking like, you know, this club culture when you're 15 years old, you know, which drove kids into doing things like wearing riding boots. Why are these kids, black kids on the south side wearing riding boots? You don't have a horse. You
Yeah,
know what
yeah.
I mean?
See, that translated over to the UK. I had no idea that came back, and sort of like really big, thick socks and things like that as well over the top of the riding boots.
Yes, insane. I mean, just with all of these different things, like I said, taking cues from black gay culture, and I can't speak on that part because I'm not. I'm black, but I'm not gay. You know what
Hmm.
I mean? And I wasn't, you know, 21 at that time. So here's all of these different things that are passed down, like I said, and then kind of repurposed in our space that that
What was there so
that
much of?
sets you apart from just you know
Mhm.
the 90 percenters, so to speak.
We had the same with the acid house movement. You would walk down the street and you would just see from the clothes that people were wearing, from the brands they were wearing or the way they wore it, you knew they were out at the weekend, you know,
That's
dancing
it.
from Friday through to Sunday morning, and you just gave them that nod of acknowledgement, you know. So,
Worldwide.
was there a case of the straight kids were taken from the gay scene, or was it just a natural, that was just the way that everything was going, or was it heavily influenced? Did they run side by side, or did 100% influence the other?
It was directly influenced um by the gay culture. So again, just dissemination. Um there was probably a little bit of interpretation of an Eastern, and I mean Eastern in the States, uh socialite, like preppy
Yeah.
culture as well, blended in there. So when we were wearing penny loafers and we had the penny in the actual loafer with no socks, or in, you know, you're wearing an Izod shirt with a polo, and I mean Ralph Lauren polo,
Hmm.
over that shirt. Some of those were um, just influenced by that East Coast. What we thought it was. It was, you know, it was probably from magazines and such, not direct experience of, you know,
I get
what
you.
goes in the East Coast socialite type thing.
Let me see if anyone else is asking any other questions. Boogie saying it was all about Smoove and the Steve Silk Hurley mixes. Cliff Williams, good afternoon, Cliff. Emily's talking about her church days. Um, what am I reading here? American classics, a mash for acid house attire. Yeah, thank you guys. If you've got any specific questions, then do feel free to drop them in there while I have Smoove here. Shouts out to Brazil. How you going, Samuel? Samuel Subcultura. He says greetings from Sao Paulo. Smoove was a big influence alongside Steve Silkhurley and Maurice. His keyboards always bring the vibes for the music. That's correct. That is never in question. Let me get back to yourself. So some of your highlights of the times at the peak of getting to travel around.
Mm-hmm.
Anything that immediately springs to mind?
Yeah, I mean, I think that what I learned is that exactly what you alluded to, that you see somebody the way that they're dressed or the way that they do, you know, that you know what they're into musically and the whole thing, how they just lifestyle, culture things. And what I learned is that that is worldwide, that what we experienced in Chicago in 1981 to, you know, 85 and beyond, um, that kind of secret society is global, in fact.
Hmm.
You know, that there are, and that I think is the constant challenge is how do you take something that is so underground and you enjoyed the fact that it was underground, you resisted being mainstream, right? And then now want to see it be mainstream, you know? And I think that that is the juxtaposition that house has been in for a very long time.
Well, I think the originators of the scene all have the best intentions. They want to spread the word 30, 40 years down the line, we still want to, they still want to spread the house sound and make sure that it's done in the correct way. And yet at the same time, that I also see the frustration of younger people who have got their social media game on point, who are getting all the accolades, who are getting all of the rewards. For someone's been in the game for 2 or 3 years because they struck it lucky with a big label or a big promotion. All of a sudden they're the hot thing, and these DJs with 30 or 40 years pedigree behind them feel that they're not getting the recognition that they deserve, right? But it is a case
Well,
of moving on as
I
well.
don't, I, I don't know that it's purely about recognition, and I may be speaking out of turn. I think that overall, it's just it's really about potential, right? I think that the issue is for house music, and from the beginning, you spoke about how it seemed it came from disco and the short period of time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Our experience was that most people, disco musicians, most people of any maturity, and I'm talking about 25-year-old maturity, right? Just shunned house in the same way that we now shun a more EDM sound or a more minimalist sound. You know what I mean? It's like now we're like, oh, if it's not Louis, with the deepest of electric piano chords and live bass and conga treatment, it's not official. When in actuality we came from the same rawness that EDM and some of those more current genres, or expressions of the house genre, I would say. We came from the same thing. And the snobbishness that we have about that
existed back then
about us.
Yeah,
you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So when you look at it from that perspective, but from the beginning, house has always had a box, and it's always been based in, and I'm just going to be very frank, it's always been based in homophobia, and that is the difference between U.S. and the other parts of the world. Is you take away the homophobia, and now you got house records, playing on pop radio. You got house records going into the top 10. All of these things. Over here, it wasn't happening. Because of the just inherent homophobia that comes with the gatekeepers.
I get you.
From a black radio standpoint, from a pop radio general market standpoint, it's just unfortunate.
It was this. I have similar stories to a lesser degree. Of course, it wasn't as severe. But when we were into house music and my friends were coming up through hip hop and so on and so forth, then they were like, "Nah, that house music, that's like a drug thing." They looked down their nose at it because it was like everyone that was into house was just like a crackhead. Do you know what I mean? And I guess it's the same kind of thing in the States on a much more severe level. That if you're into house, then it's like, well, that's your thing. But I guess no one really had an issue with that, right? I got to say a shout out to Mr. Charles Dawkins. He's here in the Pressure chat room.
Charles Dawkins.
Good friend of the family. So we spoke, and I'm going to keep you another 10 minutes and I'll let you get on. We spoke about the crossover potential and wanting to be underground and then wanting to also make some noise. You expressed a little bit of frustration the other day. Now, I could have been incorrect. I think it was inspired by when I shared an MK dub and you made a post and you said, listen, I'm listening to these guys and I don't understand how when I was having to do mixes, all they wanted was the whack vocals. And so let's talk on that for a little bit about your experiences back then.
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, MK, love MK. That's my man, 50 grand. I remember when he was MK in Kevin Saunders' studio on Gratiot Street, just trying to get on, right? And we also shared the same management with Marcy Weber at MCT back in the 90s. So put that into context, right? But where I was going with this is that back in the day, and I'm not saying I'm not at fault here. I'm taking, my own accountability there. That, as I said, a pop artist like Celine Dion We're intended to make a record that is primed for the dance floor, and being limited to having to use the vocal that's not intended for the dance floor. Um, and me being strapped to having to do this full vocal version, whereas my counterparts, my contemporaries, are able to go eat ah, ooh, ah, ooh, ooh, ah, and everybody goes, "Oh my God!" Eat ah, ooh, organ and a swing drum. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that that wasn't good. I'm just saying that my same effort on the same project, same pay range, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not availed to that, right? But what happens is 20 years later, somebody's still playing the EI organ version, but my version sounds like some cheesy stuff that you would never play, let alone play it for an hour. You know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
And from a DJ standpoint, I'm just being honest. You
Of
know what I
course.
mean?
No, that's all you can be.
I was strapped into that from a creative standpoint, from a business standpoint, and probably even a politics standpoint. That I wish I could go back and either stand firmly and not take that project, or be appreciated for an underground expression that would last, decades, as opposed to here's something for you to kind of get what you need to get Billboard DJs to
But I
chart.
think in your defense, the output of work that you have, your discography and your legacy does back up a lot of the records that you probably aren't as proud of. Did you ever put anything out that you're embarrassed of, being truthful?
Hell yeah. There are records where it's clearly like, and this is no diss to the people that appreciated those records. So I have to, truncate myself a little bit in the sense that, and respect that, even though I thought it was shit, somebody else thought it was gold. And that's the great thing about art, and, it's subjective nature and the whole thing. But definitely there were things where I can listen back and say, that was a checkmate.
Mm-hmm.
You were doing that for the check. And on top of that, the part that y'all don't know is that often when I had time, I would say, "All right, I'm going to give you the thing that you want, that you can get through to the artist and the whole thing. But here, let me give you alongside this thing that's going to work in the underground and where this stuff lives." And then they don't put it out.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So that is the major label experience. That,
That
granted,
that
the
that's
house
just
I live in
that's
is a
just
big,
down to
amazing house and all of that stuff.
sorry for talking over you. That's just down to ignorant and clueless A&R people, right? As the years progressed.
Absolutely. I mean, I think there were a handful of A&R people that I loved working with, who understood the culture and helped me understand how, yeah, we got to straddle this fence. I got this, this whole infrastructure that I have to deal with that makes all of this make sense. But at the same time, you know, I'm from where you are from, and I understand where you're from. So, there's a handful of Johnny D, perfect example. Johnny D from Atlantic, and Henry Street. Definitely I could understand the stuff that he had to go deal with in the conference room, so to speak. But he could understand and knew very well stuff that I was talking about from a dance standpoint. I mean, from a dance floor standpoint, from
Mm-hmm.
actual use of the music.
Everyone always wanted to try and emulate the successes of the past. We hear again on so many of the interviews, records getting to the top of the Billboard chart with zero radio play off the back of being underground in the clubs and things like that. And,
Right.
so a lot of that was living in the past. A final question for Stu. He says, I'm sorry for being greedy, but I'd like to ask Eric, do you have any desires to return to the incredible quantity of output that you had during the 90s, or are you happy keeping busy in other ways? Now, if I'd have read that before I read it out, I probably wouldn't have asked you, because you already alluded to that earlier on, saying that you don't want to share your blood, sweat, and tears with the world if it's not going to be received widely enough, right?
Now, again, that is a hard point for me, because on one side, I definitely believe you just do the art for art's sake, and whatever happens after that is really none of your business. You don't get to decide what's a hit, what's not a hit, what people love, what people don't love. You don't get to decide that. You just do the art, right? But I do think that there is a component of the business that's working against even that. That again, you put this effort in, you get this amazing performance from this vocalist or what have you, you know, or keyboard player, et cetera, et cetera. All the things that make up the record. And then it's out for, like I said, 3 days. And then here comes this rush of other records that, you know, make it, you know, just, I guess, I don't know, obsolete in that short amount of time.
I was just about to use the word obsolete. I was just
Yeah.
about to use the word obsolete. I
So
hear
I
that.
just don't, I don't favor the temporariness of music right now.
The short shelf life. Okay, so you talk about great vocalists. Do you want to tell us about a particular great vocalist who's not a million miles away from yourself that's not doing so great at the moment?
Absolutely, with tons of waters. That is my wife and my love, creatively and in real life. Just our collaboration has just been like no other. And one of the things that I love about her, she is not a. Often we get great singers who settle for doing house music. Yeah, I didn't have the career I wanted to have here, so I guess I can do it through house music, and then hopefully that will, you know, be a step. No, Latanza is house through and through, and that's all she wanted to do was house music. She never had desires to, oh, I don't want to make this R&B record or this, you know, such and such and such. It's always been about house music.
I hear that. I hear that. Well, listen, it's Sunday morning now. I know you've got a huge afternoon. This was just a little tickle of a more lengthy interview that we'll do. Hopefully, I'll be able to get yourself and Maurice side by side, and we'll be able to set the record straight a little bit more. I don't want to take up any more of your time. I am going to go to Deja Vu. And then I'm also going to go to your vocal mix of Thick Dick. Are you a fan of that?
Absolutely.
Wonderful. Okay, so on behalf of myself and all the crew here, thank you so much for your time this Sunday, and we will talk to you again in the not too distant, my friend.
Thanks for having me.
It's been an absolute pleasure, man. Take care.